Just want to share some thoughts that I've had recently, and I haven't given a ton of thought to it. I'm fairly new in this line of thinking, but I think there's some value here to be gained. So I'm just going to let it rip, and we'll see where it takes me. So I was listening to a football broadcast, and they talked about a running back having great vision, and yet his vision sometimes got him in trouble because what would happen was he would see opportunities as big gains, and then he would try to exploit those opportunities and then in turn get tackled for a loss. And they suggested that he should just hit the hole and take what the defense gives him. And I got to thinking that, his vision is his strength. And essentially what they're asking him to do is sort of betray his vision and just take the immediate short-term gain. So I was wondering how that applied to hitters, and here's where that's led me. Let's see where this goes. But, I truly believe that the best hitters look for visual cues as quickly as possible. No different than a running back, that really good hitters look for cues as quickly as possible. And when they're really young, they see that visual right there, and they're in swing mode right now. And many times what that'll lead them to pulling the baseball, just because their brain's working faster than their young peers, and they see it right here, and they make their mind up quickly, and then they swing, and then they pull the baseball. So and I think this is true. I think when players are 6, 7, 8, 9, I think we realize that the best players pull the baseball. So they get rewarded with success by constantly anticipating sooner and seeing the ball in this position. So essentially what they're developing is they're developing a broad focus, improving their vision and seeing things clearly well out in front. The lesser player doesn't anticipate so well. So the ball comes out of a pitcher's hand, and he doesn't really start processing until the ball is in this area right here. And those players, when they're really young, they hit the ball to the opposite field. And that, I don't necessarily think it's so much in line with their swing is so flawed. I think it has to do with their vision. The better players have better tracking skills, and they develop them sooner. And this does play out with respect to the changeup. And again, I'm going to bounce back and forth here, but I'm just going to follow where my thoughts lead. So the reason why a changeup isn't effective for lesser players is because the changeup comes out of our hand looking very similar to a fastball, and the better hitters are looking for those clues right now, and they often rely on those clues right out of the hand. Whereas the lesser players are looking for clues in this area right here. So that changeup doesn't have the same value for a lesser hitter, because by the time they're reading it, that less speed actually plays to the lesser hitter. But out here, when they're looking for that visual, that clue real quick, that speed sort of betrays that really, really good hitter, because, it's just different. So far, I like my line of thinking in the respect of looking for clues well out in front. Well, here's what I was thinking. So my concern is that when we identify swing changes with players, do we inadvertently sort of cannibalize that really, really good instinct for hitters? So if a hitter has this great skill of picking up these clues as quickly as possible right out of the pitcher's hand, but our swing has a tendency to pull the baseball, and then all of a sudden we identify that we want our better hitters to start hitting balls to the opposite field, we've got to be really, really careful that hitting balls to the opposite field doesn't delay their anticipation skills. It doesn't slow them down, because we constantly want our better hitters picking up clues as early as possible. So my fear becomes, if we start addressing an opposite field approach too soon, or we simply rely on the swing itself to create the ball flight, then we might actually be hurting our kids and their visual skills. And I think maybe this is that perception action coupling that does have some traction here of late. So here's a point. Okay, so we want to impact a ball back here, and we want that ball not necessarily to be pulled. We don't want to come around the ball, right? We want to stay behind the ball. Most good hitting coaches understand we want to stay behind the baseball. So what if a player's swing is flawed, where he takes a pitch on the outside corner and he has a tendency to pull that ball? So we work real hard on changing a swing and trying to create a swing that gives us a ball flight to the opposite field, because ultimately we know that ball thrown in that location should be hit to the opposite field. Well, the difficult thing with teaching hitting is errors come in two types. Errors are timing errors and errors are swing errors. So if all that we're seeing is ball flight, my concern is that we identify a swing error, but the thing that is so difficult to measure are those timing errors. So my concern is in a perfect world, maybe right there is where one of our developing hitters is recognizing certain clues, and his brain is processing what he sees. And then all of a sudden, we spend all our time working on him hitting into the opposite field, and potentially we might like how his swing is developing, but in the process, because he's focusing on his swing, maybe now all of a sudden he's picking up clues a little bit deeper. And my concern is that the measurable thing is improving, but the unmeasurable thing is going undiagnosed. And we spend all winter working on driving balls the opposite field, and we work on maybe changing a swing path, which ultimately can pay dividends. But in the process, we spend time working on that swing, and we don't address what's happening out in front here. So, and I suppose that would be the equivalent of a running back, trying to hit the hole and trying to take advantage of that short-term gain, but losing some of his most basic instinct of hitting those big plays, because we're basically changing his focus to address the hole that's there, and maybe his great vision starts to be compromised a little bit at the expense of just hitting that hole in the short term. So I guess this is me saying that I guess we got to be careful. I think we need to be careful. I think we need to constantly teach this piece, identify as quickly as possible, because if we can identify as quickly as possible, that absolutely will make us a better hitter. We'll be able to be on time much better when we can identify what pitches are being thrown. And when we I guess freeze this degree of freedom, freeze it, and not spend much time concentrating on it, and all we really spend time on is the swing, potentially what we do is we slow down this ever critical vision that hitters need in favor of just the swing. So these things all go together. We can't obsess over the swing and not consider how the swing does affect our vision and how we process pitches thrown to us. In many respects, that's why batting practice isn't nearly as valuable as tee work. Because when we're doing tee work, so long as we have a great imagination, we can constantly visualize what's coming out of the pitcher's hand. But in batting practice, this thrown ball, a lot of that heightened awareness is taken away from us, where we're literally just reacting to a 40-something mile an hour pitch, and we don't really have to rely on our vision. We can take our vision for granted, so to speak. So just a thought here that the swing itself is not independent of our visual processing. And just because a player isn't hitting the ball on the ball flight that you want, I guess we need to be ultra concerned and careful that an opposite field approach doesn't imply hit the ball deeper. Because if we hit the ball deeper, if we let the ball get in, which is such a common cue, if we let the ball get in, what we might be saying is let's turn off our heightened visual sense and just let it track deep, and then we are absolutely we're not growing, because we're not looking for those ever essential clues out of the hand. We're going to let the ball get in. We're going to turn our brain off until it gets right about in here, and then we just become a lesser hitter. So there's this delicate balance between heightened awareness, looking for clues as quickly as possible, improving our vision, looking in this broad window for any clues that we can get, and still hitting the ball where it's pitched. And again, because this skill is unmeasurable, at least as far as I can tell, when we look for balls and when we track balls. I think the where I stand right now is there isn't necessarily an answer, just awareness that maybe we need to be sensitive to how we do train this, and then we don't obsess over driving balls the other way if in fact that slows our processing down. So just something I was thinking about, something to be aware of. I'd love people's feedback, and if in fact it's something that they've thought about too.